Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fifth of our Friday night spooky sessions. Tonight, I have two stories for you. One is fictional, the other one is sort of based on truth with a little bit of urban legend wrapped around it, but I hope you enjoyed them both. The first one is a little longer than usual, so just a heads up, we may go a little over our time. I hope not, but I just hope that you can sit back, relax, and listen to our first story, which is called Death Marriage. During my junior year of college, I was given the opportunity to study Chinese for 1 year at one of the top universities in China, Zhangjiaozhong University. It was a great opportunity for me because my minor in college is Chinese. So I figured it would be a great way to improve my spoken Chinese. Well, I began my language classes at the beginning of September 2012. And after a couple of weeks of studying, I really began to realise that in order to become a fluent Chinese speaker, I needed to make lots of Chinese friends. I succeeded. I made lots of friends, but I became particularly close to one girl named Ying Ying. We had a lot in common: movies, books, TV shows, music artists. It was surprising how many similar interests we had. However, the most notable interest that we shared was a fascination with the supernatural. Ying Ying was a devout Buddhist, and she believed that she had a hypersensitivity to the spiritual. She claimed that the spirit had visited her, that the most was the spirit of her dead grandmother. Sometimes she would tell me that she couldn't bang out because a dead grandmother told her that she needed to study. Other times it was things like, "I can't go out tonight because my grandmother told me that last night that if I go out tonight, I'll die." Well, I didn't really believe in any of that stuff. My interest in that sort of thing was just for fun, but Ying Ying really believed in all of it. I met Ying Ying at the beginning of October 2012. And one day, we were in a coffee shop discussing these types of things, and she brought up an old Chinese custom that was completely new to me. "Have you ever heard of the death marriage?" she asked. "No. What's that?" "Well, it's an old Chinese custom. If a family had a son that died, before the son's funeral, the parents would hold a wedding ceremony for their son so that they would have a wife in the afterlife," she told me. "Well, that's not so weird. Lots of cultures had women who volunteered to be killed for a dead man," I mentioned. There was Scandinavia and India, but apparently this practice was a little different. "These girls weren't volunteers," she explained. "The parents of the sons would often find dead girls or even pay people to kill girls for their sons." That's just freaky. Was this legal?" Well, I was beginning to freak out a little. "Well, it was. It was frowned upon, but it didn't really become illegal until the end of the Dong dynasty. There was an incident right here in Jian." "You're kidding me." "I kid you not," she told me. She then started telling me the legend of how it became illegal. During the Dong dynasty, Jian was the capital. There was a girl living in the city named Huang Lei. Huang Lei was supposedly the most beautiful girl in Jian. And at the same time, there was an army officer living in the city named Yang Sen. He was the son of a wealthy family, and he was one of the imperial family's most promising officers. Well, one day Yang Sen was out on patrol with his soldiers when a snake spooked the horse. He was thrown from the horse and he snapped his neck. Oh, wow, that must have been so embarrassing. I said, mocking her. Shut up. I'm not done. Anyway, he was a young man and he was unmarried. Before his funeral, his parents hired a witch named Nu Wu to kill a girl for her son to marry. The first girl that came to Nu Wu's mind was Huang Lei. Whoa, wait a second, pause. The witch's name in Chinese means witch, and her name is Nu Wu, which means witch. I was starting to think that this story was just rubbish from start to finish. This story is where we get our word for witch. Now, shut up and let me finish, will you? She was getting exasperated with me. Anyway, the witch brutally murdered Huang Lei and sold her corpse to the family of Hang Sen. Then the family held a death marriage ceremony and a funeral for both of them. And 1 week later, the witch was found nailed to a wall in her home, and her head was sitting in the window. Yang Sen's parents were found dead the following day. They'd been killed in the same fashion. However, some of the servants said that they saw Yang Sen and Huang Lei walking and holding hands in the house the night before. Vengeful spirit rumours spread throughout the city like wildfire. So the emperor officially declared the practice to be illegal. Some people say that the spirits of this dead couple still wander the streets of Xiangzhen. For me, this was a fun story, but I figured that for Ying, this was just the uncut version of the city's history. So let me ask you this. You actually believe this story? I mean, it's you know, Ying Ying. I know you believe in this stuff, but do you really believe this story? She looked at me with a kind of, "You're so dumb," crossing her face, and she said, "Of course I believe it. Vengeful spirits exist." I wasn't really convinced, and I just smiled, and I just agreed with her. She had a right to believe what she wanted, and besides, the more adamant she was about her beliefs, the more interesting she would be to talk to. Anyway, a few days later, we decided to visit Chang'an, the old part of Xi'an. Neither of us had been there before, so it would be something new for both of us. We visited the area around Danyangda, which is called the Giant Wild Goose Pagoda. And while we were walking, Ying stopped and was silent for a long time. She was looking straight ahead, but I couldn't see anything. She seemed to be terrified of something. There was no mistaking it, but I had no idea what it was. She then began to tremble and shake, and then she started to cry. By this point, I was getting really uncomfortable, and I said, "Ying, what's wrong?" She didn't look at me. She just said, "Can't you see them?" "See who, Ying?" Without looking at me, she grabbed my face and pointed it right ahead of us. And that's when I saw them. It was a man and a woman wearing Tang Dynasty era clothing. They were looking straight at us and just staring. The man was dressed like a soldier. He even had a sword. The longer I looked at them, the more I realised that there was something way off about these two. More than just the fact that they were dressed in traditional Chinese clothes. The man's face was absolutely expressionless. But the woman's face was horrible. There was an unmistakable fury in her face, and she was pointing at Ying. When she saw that I was staring at her, she drew the man's sword from his sheath and pointed it directly at me. That's when Ying let go of my face and ran. She didn't stop and she didn't look back. I turned around and I didn't see anything. Well, that was just creepy as hell, I thought. And then I turned round and I ran after Ying. Well, that happened in early November 2012. My nightmares began about a week after that. At first, they were just nightmares about the story that Ying had told me. I didn't really lose too much sleep over them. I wasn't that concerned. But when I tried to ask Ying about what we saw or what I talked about, the dreams I was having, she would just say, "Let's not talk about that. Don't want to talk about it." And she changed the subject. When December 2012 came, the dreams became increasingly worse. There were several times when my roommate would wake me up in the middle of the night complaining I was screaming in my sleep. Every night I had the same dream. I dreamed that the couple came into my room. The man nailed my roommate and me to the wall next to our beds. The woman would then take the sword out of his sheath and stab us both to death. The night terrors began the first week of December 2012. I was having this dream every night. And the worst bit about these dreams is that I didn't wake up right before the woman began stabbing me. I felt every bit of it. As if I was actually awake, I was actually feeling it. It was excruciating. And it was happening to me every night. Well, because of this damn dream, I was only sleeping about 2 to 3 hours a night. I was preparing for exams, so this was a really bad situation. And after a couple of weeks with this sleep pattern, I think I started to hallucinate because I began seeing the couple in every corner of my eye, at the end of a large crowd, in the shadows. And sometimes I'd even see my teachers as the woman. And I decided that when Christmas break came, I was going back to the United States. I just hadn't been planning on returning home until August, but I figured that a vacation from all this would be healthy. And that's when I found out that in China, apparently, they don't have a Christmas break. First semester in China lasted till January the 1st. So I wasn't getting a break until then. And what was even worse, that I had exams at Christmas. And on top of that, I was being tormented every single night by this night terror. The dreams just didn't stop and my grades suffered. And so did the grades of my roommate. My exam scores were dangerously low, so I was in danger of losing my scholarship. And this needed to stop. I met Ying one last time before she returned home for the break. I had to discuss this with her. Maybe she could help me stop the dreams and the hallucinations. And at first, when I tried to talk about her, about it all, she just pushed me away and tried to change the subject. But this time, I wasn't taking no for an answer. Sao Ni Ma, don't you dare change the subject this time. I'm having night terrors every night. I can't sleep. Hell, even my roommate can't sleep. I almost completely failed all of my exams. Tell me what the hell is going on? Ying hesitated. She kept looking to our left next to where we were sitting. And a really fearful look began to emerge on her face. They're here right now. They're next to where we're sitting. I'm not coming back to Xi'an. Classes ended yesterday, so I'm leaving tonight. I've been having the same dreams. I can't take this anymore. I'm just so scared something's going to happen. You should leave too. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I figured that this extremely realistic night terrors, I knew they were possible, but I couldn't believe that these were actually ghosts haunting my dreams. Ghosts surely were just hallucinations. And I'll be honest with you, I was still in denial. I don't believe this. There's just no way that these are actual ghosts. I don't believe all of this rubbish. I'm not going to run away from an opportunity like this just because of a few bad dreams. Ying began crying. She was so horrified. She knew exactly what was going on. Now I realised that she was right. She grabbed my face and turned it to my right. That's when I saw them. They were standing right at the end of the booth where we were sitting. Looking down on us, their eyes were jet black. And they were speaking an older form of Chinese that I couldn't understand. Well, I just screamed and jerked free of Ring's hands, and everyone in the coffee shop turned and looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. I just knew I wasn't crazy. Ghosts were real, and these two were following us. Ying was right, I needed to get the hell out of China. Well, we left the coffee shop immediately. Ying went with me to my dorm to help me get packed. We went to the airport together. She helped me buy a ticket for the next flight to America. We waited together for a long time. She told me that she thought that they wouldn't be able to follow us because they were tied to Xi'an, but she wasn't sure. I was hoping, praying that she was right. My flight was first, so I left. And that was January the 2nd, 2013. Well, I turned to America. I called my friend and asked to stay at his place. I had the first good night's sleep in what felt like years. I actually slept for 36 hours peacefully. The dreams had stopped. I actually woke up properly on January the 6th, 2013. And when I awoke, I turned on my friend's computer and I logged onto my QQ account, which is the Chinese social networking site. And I wanted to see if Ying had gotten home safely and had gotten any sleep. "Hey, is everything back to normal?" I asked. And after several minutes, she sent me a link to an article in the Xi'an newspaper. "You need to read this." Well, I read the article. The article was about several murders in our university. The victims were Ying's roommates and my roommate. I was mortified. I felt responsible. We should have warned them about our dreams. And what was worse, that there were pictures of the killings. Our roommates had been nailed to the walls next to their beds. And their insides had been ripped out from their torsos. And above them all, there were characters written in blood in Chinese characters. And it said, Nazima. And in English, the phrase means, "Where are you?" So that is the end of your fictional story, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Now, our second story is a little bit shorter, and as I said before, it's apparently a true story that's probably got a little bit mixed up in, and not trying to be funny or making a pun based on the first story, but you know what stories are like when they go into Chinese whispers and then the first story ends up becoming a totally different story. But this one that I found is the one that's mostly based on the truth. So I hope you enjoy it. It's called The Monster Under Your Bed Isn't Always There to Scare You. I was lying alone in my room when I heard the voice, deep and crackly, coming from beneath my bed. "Hey," the voice called out. I told myself I was just imagining it. "Hey, kid," the voice repeated. I drew my knees right up to my chest and ducked my head under the blanket, trying to shut out the voice and the cold wind that drifted in through the window, ruffling the curtains. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm the monster underneath your bed," the voice replied. "You mean you're real?" "What do you mean?" the monster said. "Of course I'm real." "Do you have a name?" I asked. "Of course I have a name." "Well, what is it?" "Frank." "Frank?" "Yeah," the monster said. "Is there something wrong with that?" No. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I don't know. It's not very monsterly."
Well, my parents didn't want me to be a monster.
Really? What did they want you to be?
A dentist.
That's funny. I felt myself beginning to smile. You know,
What do your parents, what do they want you to be?
well, I don't know. Hey, Frank,
Yeah,
aren't you gonna, like, scare me or something?
what? Why would I do that?
Well, you're a monster, aren't you?
Well, yeah, of course I am. That doesn't mean I scare little kids.
But I thought that was your job,
It is my job to scare people,
he replied.
but only bad people.
Oh, am I a bad person? I asked.
No, he said, but you're not the one I'm here to scare.
Well, who are you here to scare? I asked.
The man inside your closet.
The skin on my arms goose-fleshed up. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but I fell silent as I heard a rustling coming from the closet. The door creaked open, and I could hear soft footsteps padding towards me across the bedroom floor. I didn't dare peek out of the blanket. The footsteps stopped, and I could hear heavy breathing right next to me, right by my ear. I squeezed my eyes tight. The warm sanctuary of the blanket disappeared and it was yanked off me. I hugged my arms around my knees and prepared for the worst. A scream shattered the night air, followed by the sound of breaking glass. I opened my eyes a crack to see a knife lying on the carpet next to my bed, the blade glinting in the moonlight. My parents rushed into the room and asked me what had happened, but I didn't know what to say, only that someone had been hiding in my closet and they'd jumped out of the window. My parents called 911 and the police came right away. They picked a man up called Gary Thompson, sprinting through the streets a couple of blocks away. He was covered in blood and broken glass. They found Gary's car abandoned near our property, and inside they found duct tape, they found knives, barbiturates, and a video camera. From what I heard, Gary's lawyer employed an insanity defence, and Gary is currently incarcerated in a mental facility for the criminally insane. I never heard from Frank again, but the officer who arrested Gary told me that he sleeps on the floor of the facility because he tells his doctors that he's terrified of Frank, the monster under his bed. So, there are your 2 stories for this evening, and I hope that you enjoyed them. Now, what do you think of your first story about the death marriage? I mean, different cultures did have different scenarios for the process of death and the ceremony of surrounding death. And I know there is an Indian cult, whether or not they still practice, that does have the wife, the term I think is being immolated, or an immolation by fire, where she's made to lie next to the corpse of her husband, and they set alight the funeral pyre, and she's burned alive. And that's part of their belief system. I must admit it's not one that I think is particularly a very good one, because I don't think it's very fair on the wife. You know, what happens if she's a very young girl? Her whole life's taken away from her. So, in that regard, I think it's very unfair. And I do hope that it's now a practice that is a thing of the past. I hope they've let that go and they're now a little bit kinder to widows. I do hope so. But we can't do anything about what happens in our pasts, can we? Apart from learn a lesson and move on. So, the whole point of that first story was the fact that these two ghosts were looking for the person who won the scholarship to China. They were searching for him, but because they can't leave Xi'an, he's safe. But if he was to go back to Xi'an, I don't think he'd last very long somehow, do you? And yes, ghosts are very real, because some of us have seen them, some of us haven't. But we all know that once we've seen a ghost or a spirit, we never forget. It stays with us for the rest of our lives. And our beliefs are never quite the same again, are they? So, with all that being said, I want to know what you think of our first story. I do hope you liked it. I'd love to hear what you think of it in the comments. And our second story with the monster under the bed. Did you believe in monsters under the bed when you were young? You know, did they ever speak to you? Do you ever thought that you saw them? Or did you just think that you saw them? And you've been told it by an older sibling, you know, just to get you to go to bed and shut up. Do you think it might ever have been that? I mean, who knows? I must admit, I never felt I had ghosts under the bed. I did dream once of dolls coming to life and walking around my bedroom. And these were all dolls that I actually did, you know, have in my possession. These were dolls I played with. And I will never forget having a nightmare of seeing all my dolls come to life and walking around my bed and looking at me. But of course, the following day when I wake up, there's nothing there. So I don't know what to tell you. Whether it was true or whether it wasn't, it felt like a nightmare to me. But this Gary got what he asked for. And I must admit, if there were going to be monsters under the bed, I would like mine to be like Frank, wouldn't you? He sounded okay to me. Right, well, on that happy note, or spooky note, I should say, I really do hope that you enjoyed the latest in our series of our Spooky Fridays, and I look forward to seeing what you've got to say in the comments. And I really do hope that you enjoyed tonight. I've loved being with you every moment. So until I see you again, don't forget, stay spooky. And there are ghosts everywhere.